Perspectives with Asama Silva, and today we're going to be tackling a very important issue, and that is homelessness here in the community and really all across the nation. It is such a problem, and I know that Malika is here to talk about it as well, and as always offering some unique perspective.
Yes. We have Malika MacDonald today with ICNA Relief. She's the director of ICNA Relief Massachusetts and also the national director for transitional housing for ICNA. Thank you so much for joining us today, Malika. To begin, could you give us a little bit about the Amal Center and what is the relief work with ICNA?
Mm-hmm. Well, ICNA Relief USA is a national faith-based disaster relief and social service organization, and one of our programs is transitional housing for homeless women. We have one such facility, the Amal Women's Center in Boston, which is our newest developed facility. And it is a program for homeless women. We have a 12-bed facility licensed through the city of Boston, and we offer transitional housing for up to 1 year. But during that time, we put in a lot of supportive services for the women that we serve.
Now, it is faith-based, you say, so is this strictly for Muslim women?
No, we serve anyone that is in need. However, the only conversation that I have with a woman of a different faith is that we do have a halal kitchen. So we ask that residents do not bring any pork products into the kitchen or into the area.
Do you find cultural differences on those who are asking for help? And I guess what I mean by that is somebody who has been battered. I mean, sadly, that would just seem to be universal. Mm-hmm. Horrible situation, need to get out of it. But the feeling based on one's religion, do you find it to be different as people are reaching out? If some feel shame or that it's their fault, and is some of that based on their upbringing and belief?
Well, we opened our first facility in 2006 in Jamaica, New York, and it was developed based on an expressed need from the clients that we were seeing in our office who were becoming homeless in New York City, many of whom were recently arrived immigrants, Muslim women who were fleeing either abuse or neglect, or had become homeless just for lack of employment, not having employable skills or education. And what we found is that many of them, or in many cities, the public shelters are overtaxed, especially with funding cuts and budget cuts. You find a lot of chronically homeless individuals in our public shelters, many of whom suffer from severe mental health issues or substance abuse, just because so many of the facilities to treat them have been closed. So they're really not facilities suitable for any woman. But what we found with Muslim women is that many of them were being harassed going to public shelters because of their faith. And they didn't have access to halal food or a clean place to be able to say their prayers. But there was also this misconception amongst service providers who really were not culturally sensitive to the needs of Muslim women. So oftentimes, Muslim women who may have been victims of abuse were being re-victimized within the facilities because they were being told, well, this is your religion. This teaches men to do this, or it's because you're a Muslim that you were treated this way. So these women were really being re-victimized and not being able to find services that really met their needs. So based on that, we developed our service model to be able to provide a safe space for these women and preserve their dignity while we're at it.
So what support services? You mentioned that at Amal Center you also provide some support services for the women that come in. What kind of support services are there?
Well, all of our facilities operate under the same model. And as soon as a woman is accepted into the program, we want them to start to think about self-sufficiency. So we immediately have them develop an action plan. And it's a document that we use for case management. So it just gets them to start to think about what they want to achieve. What are their short-term goals? What are their long-term goals? Then they bring that document and they sit down for their first case management. Now, that case management meetings happen weekly with the women, so we want them to be constantly striving. And our case managers work with them to identify resources in the community to refer them to, make sure that they're receiving any public entitlements that they're eligible for, but also getting them on affordable housing wait lists that are 10 years long, and then really trying to get them into job skills training so that they can secure employment where they are able to support themselves. So there's the case management aspect. We also have counseling available on site. We have a counselor that comes in, professional licensed clinical therapist, who does counseling with the women who are trying to overcome some of what they've experienced in life.
So how is this different from other shelters? I mean, I'm not very familiar with shelters and what every shelter provides and what shelters don't provide. How is this different than most other shelters?
Well, many of the public shelters really lack any services on site. And many of them are also short-term facilities. So, for example, there are many facilities in Boston that are 30 to 90 days. We found this throughout the country, New York, Chicago, Detroit, 30 to 90 days that you're able to get emergency shelter. What can you, if you've just, for example, you've separated, you've divorced, you never worked a day in your life, you speak very little English, what can you accomplish in 30 to 90 days? But even without being an immigrant or a Muslim woman, we find many American women born and raised in this country, within 30 to 90 days, if they've lost everything and they're starting all over again, they're not able to do so in that time frame. So many of the women are just going from one shelter to the next shelter to the next shelter without really getting any services or support to achieve the self-sufficiency.
Boy, or I would think, sadly, that 30 to 60 days, as you've just said, you've walked out, you've left everything behind. Do you begin to think that even though you were suffering that abuse,
It may be easier to go
you
back.
had a roof over your head, here are your kids, you want to make sure that they're taken care of, a place to get a meal. And that's just, it's heartbreaking to hear that. So the length of the program is, and really being able to guide them through the system, is something that seems as if, although this is faith-based, this really seems to be more of a model, and I'm wondering if others are beginning to look at this and beginning to follow this and say, this is the way to do it.
Yes, I mean, we do hope that it is a model for, on a national level, for others to be able to replicate. We have a lot of support services put into place. Although we are a younger program, we are starting now to look at developing a tracking tool so we can track the progress of the women once they leave our facility. Within 6 months, 1 year, have they still be able to maintain their living arrangements, their housing that they've moved on to from us. And we feel that that will really be something that could help us in the future in obtaining grants, but also offering this project to other people who may be interested. So personally, we get calls from throughout the country. I was just actually in Denver, Colorado, who has a huge homeless crisis happening there as well, with interest to open a facility there. We are opening in Baltimore and Phoenix, Arizona this year. I'm going to Phoenix on April 7th to do a ribbon cutting there. So it's a very easy model to be able to replicate, and it's something that we are offering to other community groups.
And if we really want to actually get to the root causes of homelessness,
Right.
as opposed to just this 30 or 60 days, you talked about the fact also that in so many shelters, people who are the chronic homeless, those who are suffering from addiction or those who are suffering from mental illness. This seems to be different, though. Here are women who are coming into your shelter. It really should be short-term. I mean, it really should be that there is a hand up for them to, they just don't know how to guide the system because, again, they've never had to. Somebody else has perhaps always taken care of that for them, or new to the country in some instances, as opposed to mental illness or drug addiction. Is that right, or are you dealing with people who are also have addiction issues or mental illness issues?
Well, during our initial intake, we do try to screen out severe mental health issues or anyone that is actively abusing drugs or alcohol, because we don't have the capacity for that. We're not treatment facilities, and we recognize that. But we do have, many of our women are also American, born and raised in this country, may have been divorced or may have lost their job, became unemployed, fell behind on their bills, and just could never catch up again. So this really offers them the opportunity and that break to be able to just go and be able to catch back up again.
10 years.
10 years.
And
Yeah,
affordable housing is extremely difficult.
So what do you do for that 10 years? I guess you sign up for that waiting list, but
Well, what we do with our case manager, who also doubles as our housing specialist, is really every application that comes down for any type of affordable housing, any type of lottery opportunity, we are making sure that our residents are putting in applications. We have residents putting in applications almost every week to any opportunity, not just the centralized Section 8 waiting list.
So what would this mean in terms of policy? There's a lot of discussion in our country right now about federal grants and social services type of grants and aid coming from the government. How would this affect places like yours?
Well, I mean, I think it's affecting the low-income communities across the country. There is a lack of affordable housing, and there's not much incentive to build affordable housing. There are some cities and towns in Massachusetts who have done better. I know Somerville has done well with, they're the most dense community in the country, but they've done well with working with the state and the city to make mandates on new construction that a certain number of units are put aside for low income and affordable housing. So I think we need to take a look at that, giving tax breaks to large developers that do set aside units. But I think there's less and less incentive to do that. And then many of the affordable housing properties that were built years ago were given incentives to keep the property affordable for so many years, and now they're aging out of those contracts. So we're losing a lot of affordable units.
You talked about the fact that a lot of women, as they were going, one of the reasons that this program began, women going into public shelters, and sort of this underlying current of this is what your religion taught you, so sort of somehow you're getting your just dessert somehow for what has happened to you. That part of it, because you obviously can't help everybody who is Muslim, so there must be Muslim women who are in public shelters. Is there education? I mean, is that part getting any better here in 2018?
I think in many of the states across the country it is getting better. Many service providers reach out to myself, reach out to my other site directors when they have clients who are of the Muslim faith, want to better serve them. So we'll consult with myself and the site directors across the country. Even before opening the Amal Women's Center in Boston, I went around to some of the local shelters in the area just to learn from them and to learn how the landscape was here in Massachusetts for homelessness. Actually, I met with one director of Project Hope who was a Catholic nun. So it was really good to learn her perspective and how she was serving the women in her facility.
Interesting, because again, faith-based, obviously different faith, but coming together, common problem. And I have to say this. I mean, this is just a problem. This is just, it doesn't seem. This isn't a Muslim problem. This isn't a Christian problem. No. This isn't a Jewish problem. This is a society's problem today.
And the women of other faiths who come to the Amal Women's Center have said that nothing compares to the Amal Women's Center. That there they feel at home. They feel that it's not a shelter, which is exactly what we're going for.
Right.
We want the women to be comfortable, but not too comfortable, because we do make them leave the facility each day because they should be productive. But it's more of a feeling of a sorority house, I think, than it is a shelter home.
Right.
So the non-Muslim women really, really appreciate the time spent at the facility and the support and the care that they receive from the staff, but also from the other women there as well.
Before you officially opened, I had made that trip to come and see the Amal Women's Center myself. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on some of the, I know you said support services, but some of the activities you were planning on doing in the house. For example, I was surprised that you do weekly yoga with all the women. Could you share with us some of the other activities?
Well, that's what makes the Amal Women's Center a little different than a shelter home and many of our other facilities across the country. Amal Women's Center is kind of a premier new project where we're opening up the facility and the projects and programs to everyone in the community, all women, not just our residents. So we do have a weekly yoga, which is kind of turned into a Zumba class. And then we also have monthly workshops or trainings. So we had an aromatherapy workshop just last month, and this coming Sunday, we're actually doing a vision board session. And we open this up to all women in the community. We've also had drum circles, and we have annually we do a domestic violence awareness month project, as well as International Women's Day. We do monthly programs, social events, just to bring a diverse group of women together, so it's interfaith and intergenerational, and just building relationships amongst women, which is really unique for the Amal Women's Center. We are also in the process, actually just hired, she'll be starting this month, a woman who will be running our computer lab. We will be having a full computer lab in the basement of the facility, which will be open to others in the community as well, but primarily focused on our residents, teaching them Microsoft Word, Excel, Microsoft Office, doing resume development, learning how to go onto job search engines and submit their resumes, mock interviews, and there'll be a variety of classes that will happen down there, finance and budgeting, banking, which I probably need to take too. So it's actually really exciting, and it's many of the classes and things that we are designing is just really coming out of the community and what we see in the community and what other women have asked for. And the way that the Amal is set up, the time that we did have the drum circle, it was a drum circle around domestic violence, and there was poetry and spoken word. And the facility just lends itself to community. It lends itself to building relationships, because you're walking into this beautiful home and you're sitting in someone's living room. You know, it's like you're sitting in someone's living room with other women. It's just a safe space to be able to heal and to be able to talk. So we're really excited about the new projects that are going to be happening in the space.
So you really must, though, be walking that fine line, because what you just described, why would I ever want to leave? And so you're preparing somebody to leave, at the same time you're giving them, especially off of the horrific experience they've just had, this very safe space, but they are eventually going to have to leave. And I'm just thinking of a conversation that's going on in the community of Worcester when it comes to public housing, when it comes to Great Brook Valley. Great Brook Valley has actually, there was a time in its history. So it went through, you know, being built, and you're coming back from World War II, and it is a place for you to be able to come in low-income housing. And then, of course, you moved on, and you're a piece of the American dream, you know, 2.5 kids and a picket fence and all of that. Then it became, you know, that low-income housing where, you know, gang activity, and it wasn't a very nice place to live. And then it has now kind of blossomed into, it is a nice place to live. People have come in, it has been cleaned up. And unfortunately and this is where the conversation comes in, what seems to have happened is, so now you have generations. So it was never meant for there to be anything more than, here's a good place for you, here's the hand up to the community, and now all of a sudden you're seeing third generation, and that isn't what, because I don't know how to put it without it sounding terrible. It's almost as if, gee, you made it too nice, because now people don't want to leave, or they don't have the incentive maybe that was once there to go somewhere else. And I'm just wondering if you know, there is a little something of that. Why would I want to leave with, drum circles and yoga and everything else?
Well, once again, those are offered to all women in
Right,
the community,
yeah.
So even if they were to leave, they could always come back for the events. But our residents have a love-hate relationship with us. We don't make it easy on them, even though it's a beautiful facility that really gives them a safe place to heal. We work with them on a weekly basis. They are constantly reminded that they are there for a set period of time. During the day, from 9 to 5, they must be out of the facility. They need to report to us weekly, what did they do each day? Were they looking for employment? Did they go to school? Were they looking for housing? And then they're asked to reflect on what lessons or challenges they had that week. So they're meeting weekly with a case manager who is constantly pushing them to those original goals that they set when they first came in. And there's a 3-month evaluation, there's a 6-month evaluation. They know that their time is limited, and at the end of the 1 year, they do have to
Right.
leave.
Right. Yeah, it's an amazing program. How many people have been through it so far?
Well, we've only been open a year.
Yeah.
A little less than a year.
So
Actually,
really,
less.
so
We haven't even
Less
been
than a
open a
year.
year.
A year. So really,
Not
so
even a
that's-
year.
But so
We've
really
had
there's just a
17
few,
women
yeah,
and close to 10 children.
children.
We currently have 9 residents and 5 children. So we're a little, we have a waiting list, which is probably at least 45 people long, and I get calls on a daily basis. Because we are considered a non-EA or a non-emergency assistance shelter, so we're public beds. The majority of shelters in the state are funded through the Department of Transitional Assistance. So if you don't receive public benefits such as food stamps or cash assistance, you're not eligible for emergency shelter through the DTA office. So we get a lot of phone calls from people who don't receive public assistance, but for one reason or another, it may have been an eviction, it may have been a disaster-related fire, or something like that, divorce, whatever it may be that lent them to be homeless. We get a lot of phone calls for people who just do not receive public benefits and cannot find a bed. There's I think less than 50 non-EA beds in the state of Massachusetts.
So you have a waiting list of 45 people?
At least 45. I don't actually announce that we have a waiting list unless when they call they
Right.
ask, because
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
just so long.
Yeah. Is there a way for you to get more? Is there an expansion plan? I mean, so is there?
Well, funding constraints at the
Yeah.
moment, and I think that's with most facilities. It's just, but there is a great need. We know in the Worcester area, we've had interest from women who work with homeless within the Worcester community and Springfield that have asked us to begin a facility in Western
Yeah.
Mass. So if the funding was available and the support, is something that we could look at in the future.
Now, you hope that after a year, the women are self-sufficient, and when they move out, they're moving into some sort of housing and some sort of way to maintain and support themselves.
Yes.
What if
Yes.
they don't come to those goals that they had set?
Mm-hmm.
What are their choices at that point?
This is something that we're actually beginning to explore now, because we are seeing, our facility is located in Dorchester, which is very close proximity to downtown Boston. There's a lot of gentrification happening in that area. It's coming up Blue Hill Avenue, and many low-income families cannot afford to live in that community any longer. But we have residents who are employed and they're working, but they just don't make enough to be able to afford a rental unit. So it's something that we're looking at now. We're going to be reaching out to some property owners that we know. There's some large real estate property owners in the city of Boston that we're going to start reaching out to them and see if we can develop a program where they may subsidize rent to a unit for some of our residents for 1 year, where we would also still provide supportive services for them while they're in that unit. And then we're also looking or encouraging them to double up and do roommate situations. But because many of our women are working in downtown Boston and their childcare is in the area, it's extremely difficult for them to be able to move out to communities such as Lowell or Lynn or further away from the city because they don't have transportation to get into the city. And then their daycare is not here, so it'd be really difficult.
If people wanted to help or get more information, how could they do that?
Well, they could visit our website. Can I say our website?
Yes.
It's www.ICNA, so that's ICNA Relief.org/Amal, A-M-A-L. And we have a video there. Hopefully, maybe you can show some clips from that video of the facility, because it is, what I did not mention is the historical background of the property itself. We were very pleased when we were able to obtain this property because it has a rich history in the American Muslim community, primarily the indigenous Muslim community of Boston. The property was owned, once owned by a very famous Jewish rabbi before the Muslim community purchased the property. And it was purchased by the Nation of Islam during the time that Malcolm X was very involved with the Nation of Islam, and Malcolm called Boston home. So right next door is a mosque, which used to be the synagogue, where Malcolm X used to teach. And he used to stay in this home when he would visit Boston. And then after Malcolm X was reassigned, Louis Farrakhan was assigned the minister of that mosque, and he stayed in the home and raised his children there. So it's a very historical property, which we were able to preserve the beauty of the property when we restored it. So we feel that we have some mighty big shoes and legacy to fill there.
Yeah.
So it was an exciting project. And if you drive by the house, it's actually the nicest house on the street. So we've done beautification projects in the front yard to plant flowers, to really try to revive the whole community, not just the residents and the people that come to stay there. So it's something that we want the whole community to be proud of.
We only have a moment left, but the significance of the name Amal.
Amal is hope in Arabic.
So it really is the Center for Hope, because you had said that there is another organization, the Hope Center.
Project Hope,
Project
yes.
Hope. So,
and it was just a
yeah,
coincidence. We didn't copy it.
Yeah.
And it was, what was very nice too is we have in the front lobby a sign that says Amal, and around the sign are decals in various languages, French, Spanish, Italian, and Hebrew, that also say Amal. So we want it to be an all-inclusive home for everyone.
Well, this is the part of the program where we always turn to you, Asama, to get your perspective on what we have just talked about over the last half hour.
Right. I talked about sexual abuse, domestic violence on this show, and I wanted to bring in Malika to talk about some of the opportunities of some of these women that they have. Some hope, as we said, for this Amal Center that brings hope to women who are in these situations. And please, if you want to help out and find out more, please visit icnarelief.org/Amal. And I thank you so much, and I hope you join us again next week.